Jade from New Jersey, it's the SNL Nerds, the show where two comics from New Jersey nerd out about Saturday Night Live. I'm your co-host, John Trumbull.
And I'm your co-host, Darren Patterson.
Hey, Darren, how you doing?
I'm good. You know, hanging in there, doing what we can. Summer's winding down, John. It's coming to a close. This is, the boys of summer are gone, as they said in that one song.
In that one song, yes, they did. And yes. I'm kind of excited because we have a guest with us today to talk about the movie that we are talking about today. We have my friend Zaki Hasan, who's a film critic for the San Francisco Chronicle and the co-host of the Movie Film Podcast, one of my favorite movie film podcasts. So welcome, Zaki. Great to have you here.
Hi, thanks so much. Hey, how's it going?
So, Zaki and I have just kind of gotten to know each other online over the last few years, and I've guest starred on a few of his podcasts, so it's fun to have him here on the SNL Nerds. And, yeah. And, the Movie Film Podcast, it's one of my favorites, in no small part because you've got such a great theme song. I love your theme song. So
I have to give a shout out that theme song is sung by our former co-host Sean Coyle, who wrote it and did the little music and everything. And that's it. Even though he hasn't been part of the show for a while, he remains part of it because you get to hear his voice at the top of every episode.
Oh wow! Ooh. I didn't know that you and Brian had another co-host. That must have been before my time. That's
yeah. When we started, I think for the first. Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going too far back, too early, I should say, in our run. But yeah, for the first, I think 2 years, yeah, give or take 2.5 years, we had a co-host before he dropped out amicably. It was just he got too busy. So Brian and I have kept the candles lit, you know.
Yeah. How long has the Movie Film Podcast been going?
We just celebrated our 10th anniversary.
Wow!
At the end of last month.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Darren and I are coming up on 4 now, so it's we've got a ways to go to match you.
Yeah, we're right behind you. We're gaining.
Well, I think, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this too, right? I mean, the key to sustaining a long-running podcast is you want to have a partner who you enjoy talking to.
Yes.
Oh, yes. So we're never going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope to get one of those one of these days. I mean, that's the dream.
Ouch.
Oh, you bastard.
No, but I mean, yeah, it does make a difference when it's somebody that's easy to talk to and you agree about enough stuff that it's civil, but you disagree about enough to make it interesting. And yeah, that's a good thing to have. And that is something that you and Brian have, I think. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, shout out to Zaki's co-host Brian Hall. How did you guys hook up anyway?
So I first met Brian in 1999, fall of '99. I was in the Chicago suburbs, and I was at Houlihan's restaurant with a group of my friends, and he happened to be our server. And my friends and I, we were talking about, at the time I worked for a TV station that was part of our community college, and we were colleagues there. And he was a movie buff. He's like, "Oh, you guys are into movies too." I mean, it was literally like that. You like movies? I like movies too. And it just so happened that the following week, the next quarter of school was going to start, and I was registered for a film class that he was also registered for. So he was our server. We had a good time. And then the following week, I was like, "Hey, I remember you from last week." And from then to now, it's been a friendship that I consider one of the most important things in my life, you know?
Wow.
Wow, that's wonderful. You had a real life meet cute.
Mm-hmm.
You had a real life meet cute. I love that.
It really, and it's funny because we met in fall of '99, and then 4 years later, I got married, and he was, one of my best men at my wedding. So.
Oh wow!
Oh,
that's great!
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's so cool. Zaki, what's your SNL origin story?
Yeah, are you like a fan or a casual fan? Do you have any favorite cast members, favorite eras, anything like that?
Well, So I very distinctly remember the very first episode of SNL I saw was it was summer of '92, so it was during the '91-'92 season, and it was hosted by Jason Priestley. Musical guest was Hammer.
Mm.
Is there a more '90s booking and a more early '90s booking for SNL than that?
I know, right?
That is the most '90s thing I've ever heard in my life.
Is this when he had dropped the MC and he was just Hammer and he was trying to rebrand himself as like the
I
more gangster
I
version?
believe so. Cause right, I think because by '92 he had just become Hammer. I think I could be wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
like when he came out with "Too Legit to Quit."
yeah,
He performed "Too Legit to Quit."
Yeah,
That
I
was one of the
did.
songs he did. Yep. And so this is like Kevin Nealon, Mike Myers, Dana. I
right,
mean that was my golden age of SNL.
right,
Mm.
yeah,
Sandler, Spade, Chris Farley, Phil Hartman, obviously, Tim Meadows. I mean, it's sort of like that's base one for me. And I've stayed a regular viewer all the way since. I mean, my gosh, on Peacock they have like their SNL channel
hmm
where you can just go to it and it'll be playing random sketches and it just jumps around and it's they were showing a sketch yesterday. It was a Weekend Update where Seth Meyers was like brand new. I don't think he was even at the anchor desk at this point, and
hmm
uh he's like making fun of Derek Jeter, and like he looks so young, and Tina Fey looks so young, and I'm like, I remember watching that live. It's like
Yeah,
I know,
it's so
and
crazy.
that's like 20 odd years ago now.
Yeah, and
yeah,
my kids watch SNL obviously, and I just think about it, I'm like, what is their golden era going to be, right?
hmm
And I'm thinking like probably in the last like 5 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
So
think it's
probably.
generally like whenever you first start watching it, when you first start falling in love with the
totally,
show. So, I mean, because
Yeah,
totally,
I still look back, I started watching during like the Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, John Lovitz years,
yeah,
and
mm.
those are still like kind of my ideal cast in a way.
hmm
Yeah. Like I've
yeah.
been on a bunch of other SNL like podcasts, and like a lot of the other people on the podcast are a couple years younger than me, and to them, like the golden era is the Bill Hader, Sudeikis, Kristen Wiig, Will Forte years. Like to
Yeah,
them, they're like, oh
Wow.
no, this is when SNL was at its best.
yeah,
I was like, wow, wow,
2004. Yeah,
it's
And
pretty
that I mean
crazy.
that's the funny thing, right? I mean there have been lulls. I think it's like the '94 cast, which is like generally thought
Mm,
of as like not particularly great. But I mean I'm always like, look, I mean there's ups and downs. SNL is SNL. There
yeah,
you're gonna it's this continuous spigot where you're gonna have comedic geniuses come up. Some of them you'll be like, who's that person when you think about it 10 years later.
yeah,
But
yeah,
otherwise, we know the score with SNL at this point. I'm so glad we don't get as many of those Saturday Night Dead headlines anymore,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's so beyond hack at this point,
right?
and I think they used up their lifetime allotment of those in like the mid '90s when the show was
That's right.
not doing so hot. Um, have you seen any of like Robert Downey Jr.'s era, like the season that he did on the show?
You know what's funny is I've seen a handful from that season, but like before we got on, I was like straining my brain trying to think of even a single memorable sketch
Yeah,
that he was in that really stayed with me, and I'm like, God, that really was like just a miscalculation on Lorne Michaels' part. His whole approach to that
it's
season.
yeah. He really seemed to be hedging his bets in a weird way, where he's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take some young movie actors and some character actors, and then some sketch comedy groundling people, and yeah, it's just a weird mishmash of a cast.
yeah.
Uh,
There's one sketch I sort of remember. Like I think you can find it online somewhere where, like Robert Downey Jr. He's like in a suitcase, and he
yeah,
has his head sticking out of
Yes,
the top of it.
that's what I was thinking of too.
yeah. It's like Suitcase
I just,
Boy or something like that. It's
yeah,
like the type of thing you'd see in a weird parody of SNL of like a lame sketch comedy show. It's
yeah.
it's
It's like
so
some weird
strange.
like avant-garde
Yeah,
comedy, like art comedy type of '80s type of thing. It's
but I
very
did.
much
He did do a sketch when he came back to host at some point. I think this was like the late '90s, maybe when he was having that comeback with Ally McBeal. I think that was around the time he hosted the show, and he did a sketch which is still one of my favorite SNL sketches, where they're doing like a West Side Story type of thing, and RDJ is in a street gang, and then everybody in the street gang starts singing like we're the Cobras, and Norm Macdonald's character, who's the leader of the gang, he's like, "Oh no, this isn't good." He's like, "What the hell are you guys doing? You're doing all this choreographed stuff. Like, did you discuss this beforehand? What are you doing?" And they start having a rumble with the Panthers, the Puerto Rican gang, and and then like all his bros are coming out doing like ballet type dance steps and pirouettes and stuff, and Norm Macdonald's just like, "Oh, this doesn't look good for me."
What's going on here?
It's a very funny sketch. Yeah. So
Yes,
yeah,
that I do remember.
that I think is one of the better things. But I haven't watched too much of that season that he was on because it was like just before I started watching the show on a regular basis. So seen very very little of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, you when I invited you onto the podcast, we gave you the choice of you could do any movie you wanted with as long as it had an SNL alum, and you chose a somewhat unusual choice, but it is technically a movie starring an SNL alum. We're doing 2008's Iron Man starring Robert Downey Jr. So, what made you decide on this film?
I just like being difficult. I was like, "How about this?" And I kind of love. I feel like in real time, your reaction is probably like, "Eh, yeah, I guess you're right." Like, yeah, I'll allow it,
No, not at
McCoy,
all.
on a technicality.
No, not at all. I mean, Darren and I were both huge fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we've done other films where Robert Downey Jr. is the SNL connection. We did Tropic Thunder a year
Oh,
or two
okay.
back, and so yeah. So I mean, yeah, technically all of Robert Downey Jr.'s filmography and Anthony Michael Hall's
It all
filmography
counts.
and Randy Quaid's and Joan Cusack, all of those are open to us because they were all
You know,
SNL cast members.
one thing I will say about Iron Man, the first one, is, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I feel like it weirdly does not get talked about as much, even though the MCU as a big behemoth of a thing gets talked about all the time. But I think people tend to lose sight of just how damn good the first Iron Man is.
Yeah, like I mean, for those that don't know, of course, Iron Man came out May 2nd, 2008, written by Mark Fergus, Hawk Otsby, Ark Markham, and Matt Holloway, directed by John Favreau. Had a budget of 140 mil. Went on to make did all right, made 585 mil. And like I remember when this film came out, it was like a thing where like people weren't expecting much from it, and so like the fact that it became what it was like kind of shocked everybody because I mean at the time John Favreau, I mean he was a pretty well known director. He had done Elf, and he had done Zathura. Um, I think Robert Downey Jr. was kind of coming back from his issues with drugs and rehab, so like he wasn't really in a big demand. And as far as I know, I mean, you guys probably know a little bit more than I do, but like, Iron Man as a character wasn't really like an A-list character, really. Like, he wasn't like as like a household name like Spider-Man or Batman or Superman. Like, he was kind of like a C-level character, from what I understand. Like, I only knew him because of Ghostface Killer from the Wu-Tang Clan, and like how like he always included Tony Stark references in his raps, and he named his first solo album Iron Man. That's how I knew about him. But yeah, but so the fact that this movie came out and did what it did, and just like pretty much totally like altered the future of superhero movies. It's pretty fantastic.
It is something else. Yeah, I mean, Iron Man, he was like a Marvel Comics mainstay. But yeah, he was considered like a B or C level list character. He was like a tier below than, like, say, Spider Man, the Hulk, Captain America, those guys. But he was still a major character in the Marvel Universe. He was one of like the big three Avengers, along with Captain America and Thor. And his comic had been published continuously since the 1960s. So yeah.
Okay. But yeah, like I remember watching that in the theaters, and I was like surprised by it. Like, whoa, this is really good. Robert Downey Jr. like really. he did an amazing performance, and now like you can't like he's like forever sort of married to that to that performance of Tony Stark. Like he is Tony Stark. Like I can't. I
Hmm.
know like for years before this, they were. I think I remember hearing that they were trying to do like an Iron Man movie with Tom Cruise or a few other people, but like now at this point, like I can't picture anybody else being Tony Stark except for Robert Downey Jr.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a really interesting casting choice, and I think that really helped set it apart from like the typical superhero movie or the typical comic book movie. Um, and Favreau even said that he the reason he picked Downey was because of his history. And I mean, the character of Tony Stark, one of his most famous comic book stories, is called Demon in the Bottle, and it's all about Tony Stark confronting his alcoholism. And he's had a few storylines about that since. I mean, the comic book character at one point he's actually homeless because of his
Oh damn!
alcoholism. Yeah, and because Obadiah Stane like stole his fortune, um,
Oh
which
wow!
and he's the villain in this movie. So
Yes, yes. Jeff Bridges comes
yeah,
through with a bald head and a
yeah.
beard.
Zaki, how did you come to the character of Iron Man? Do you remember discovering the character in the comics? Are you a big fan of Iron Man, the character?
Oh, I was a huge fan of Iron Man. That was kind of the cool thing for me is I read Iron Man comics throughout the 80s and 90s all the way up to the early 2000s. So,
Hmm.
uh,
Mm.
I have all of those. I have that whole run still. Uh, so it was definitely one of those things where when the movie, I remember in the 90s, at one point, I think the project was at New Line and Nicolas Cage was attached,
Yeah.
Wow.
and 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 at the time I was like, oh yeah, I could see that, and then he left Iron Man to do Superman, which he of course ended up not doing. But the movie languished, and then Tom Cruise was attached, so much so that they there was they relaunched the comic I think in '04 or '05, and Adi Granov, the artist, drew Tom Cruise as Tony Stark.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, you can. It's like clear as day. It's the same way Brian Hitch drew Sam Jackson as Nick Fury, like way before he was cast as Nick Fury.
Right, right.
Mm.
That's what Granov did there. And what's funny is at the time I was like, I could see it, I guess, but I wasn't crazy about that, you
Yeah.
know.
Tom Cruise
Mm.
seems
Whereas,
almost like a little too on the nose, you know?
right.
Mm.
I remember when Downey was cast, and I was definitely on board. But it's very interesting to me because, like, to me, the Tony Stark of the MCU as time went on became more and more Robert Downey, whereas I think the Stark that we get in the first Iron Man, that's the closest to the comic book version of Tony Stark.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, as the sequel films went on, a lot more of the RDJ snarkiness and sarcasm
Right.
was baked into the character because Tony Stark was never particularly funny in the comics or never
That's right.
particularly sarcastic.
Right.
He was like that billionaire playboy. He was Howard Hughes basically.
That's
Um,
right.
Mm.
he was a playboy but an inventor, but he wasn't particularly funny or charming or a big wisecracker. So
Right. That's exactly. Yeah. It's when nowadays people are like, oh, Iron Man, he's got to be funny. Like that's
mhm.
he's hilarious. And I'm like, that's cool. Like it's not even like I think that's the great thing about the MCU is that it gained sentience. It became its own thing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It's the computer from Superman 3. It wants to live, uh, which is the one and only time anyone will ever compare the MCU to the supercomputer that Richard Pryor created in Superman 3.
Right. Sure.
Uh,
Mhm.
but regardless, I love all of it. I love all the changes because to me, I'm like, well, the comics are the comics and they're always there. But definitely what I appreciate the most about that first movie is to me, yeah, that is the closest to the comic book Iron Man we've ever gotten in the MCU.
Yeah. And there are so many sort of in jokes and tips of the hat to the comic version. I mean, they basically update the origin in the original comic book origin, which was done, I think, around like 1963, 64.
Mhm.
Um, Tony Stark is like testing weapons in Vietnam, and he's
Correct.
Yeah.
literally in Vietnam, and he's captured, and he builds this suit of armor to escape, along with the assistance of a man named Yinsen. I think even the character's name was the same.
It's still
Yeah.
Yinsen.
Yeah,
Yep.
and 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 he escapes, and then when he gets back to the States, he refines the armor further. I mean, and even like that first armor, it's very much what you see in the movie. It's that big clunky gray thing, and
Yeah.
then when he gets back to the States, he paints it gold, and then later gets a more sleek armor that was designed by Steve Ditko, the guy who co-created Spider-Man with Stan Lee. And yeah, and it's amazing how beat for beat they do pretty much the same origin. They just transport it to Afghanistan to make it more current.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty awesome. I got like the scenes where he gets captured and then he breaks out after building the Iron Man suit
Yeah.
are still are fantastic. And I didn't even realize this until I saw it last night for this podcast. But like I had no idea that Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine is in this movie as a cameo. And like that's something I didn't capture until like yesterday. Until like like this is like a movie I've seen 100 times, and I saw it like last night for this podcast, and I was like, "Is that Tom Morello?" And yeah, sure enough, it is.
Where does he
He's one of
pop
the
up,
Ten Rings
Aaron?
people.
Yeah, he's one of the guards. He's one of the guards
Yeah.
that works for the Ten Rings, which is something else that pops up later on in the MCU.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it really is an amazing opening to the film, and it gets intense. I mean, it just starts right there in Afghanistan. We see Tony Stark get captured, and I mean, it's a very intense sequence. It feels like something out of like Black Hawk Down or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and it's real indicative of Jon Favreau's approach to the movie. It starts out in a very real world. It's not like a comic book world as it starts. It just sort of kind of gradually turns into a comic book world as the movie goes on, because he just leads you there step by step, so that the building of the armor seems totally plausible. And then by the end, we've got two guys in the armored suits fighting each other, but you still totally buy it because he's just gone there bit by bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
It
made that.
it's sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but just real quick. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that summer of 2008, you had Iron Man at one end, and you had The Dark Knight about 2 months later. And
Mhm.
you talk about two movies that are like tent poles for everything the superhero movie has been able to encompass in the decade and a half since then.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh man,
it's like an impact crater followed immediately by another impact crater.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and this isn't even the only Marvel movie of that summer. We had like at the tail end of the summer, we had the Incredible Hulk movie with Edward Norton, which I still think
Yep,
is one of the more underrated movies in the
I agree.
MCU.
mm,
I totally agree.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that movie gets a little overlooked, just probably because of the whole Edward Norton casting switch thing. But it's a good movie, and I feel like it might have been an even better movie if they'd listened to Edward Norton a little bit more, because most of those scenes are pretty good. Uh, but but
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I agree. I agree.
it unfortunately gets a little overshadowed because of Iron Man, because Iron Man was just such an out of nowhere hit. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, well, I mean, if you want to keep talking about the theme of people getting swapped out,
mhm.
we could talk about James Rhodes, Terrence Howard in this film, who unfortunately we don't see in future films. And I don't, I liked Terrence Howard in this film. Like, I mean, part of me, I mean, look, I'm team Don Cheadle all day. We're on this podcast as officially saying Don Cheadle rocks.
Yes,
But like I have to admit, I think the chemistry between Terrence Howard and Robert Downey Jr. is a little bit better. I
yeah,
think
I'd
I don't
agree.
know. I could be wrong.
I'd agree. I don't think it would have been the worst thing in the world if they'd hung on to Terrence Howard. I buy him and RDJ's Tony Stark as old friends a little bit more than I do with Don Cheadle. Like I heard it compared once as like you can imagine that RDJ's Tony Stark and Terrence Howard's uh, Rhodey got into some trouble back in the day, and that they had some hell-raising nights together.
Mm.
With Don Cheadle, I picture it more like RDJ goes off and does his thing, and Don Cheadle's like, okay, well, you have fun with that. I'm just going to go to bed.
Good. It's late. I'm going to bed. Some nice warm milk. I
Yeah,
hear you.
exactly. Exactly. He's just having a quiet night at home. That's how I picture it. But I mean, of course, Cheadle's grown on me in the role, and he is Rhodey now. But yeah, it is kind of too bad how that shook out. And you have that moment towards the end of the film where he looks over at the Mark II armor and he just goes, "Next time, baby," and it's just the irony hits you
Mm.
so hard when you see that
Womp
now.
womp.
You're just like,
Oh
oh
dear.
yeah, not for you, Terrence Howard.
Not today, Terrence. Not today. Not
But
ever.
but the really wild thing is, like, Terrence Howard was like the first guy hired for this film and the highest paid guy, because
Wow.
it was. I mean, this movie is so far back now. It was a time when Robert Downey Jr. wasn't considered bankable. So Terrence Howard got something like 3.5 million, and I think RDJ got like 500,000, something like that. It just seems absurdly
Whoa.
low for him now.
That's a steal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he made up for it in the sequels, I'm sure. But
Yeah, but by
Oh.
the end, they just gave him Australia. I think that was his salary. Just the continent of Australia.
and he deserves it. Damn it,
Right.
He saved the universe.
he deserves a continent. Yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, if you look back at it now, it's they got a bargain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it is in retrospect very odd casting for a summer blockbuster film, because you have Robert Downey Jr., you have Gwyneth Paltrow, you have Jeff Bridges, and you have Terrence Howard, and none of those are like people you really associated with big action movies, or at least you didn't back then. It's a quirky cast. You'd expect that to be like the cast of a quirky indie.
Which is
Yeah, yeah.
apparently how it. That's apparently how it played out. John Favreau has talked about how oftentimes they were performing it on the fly,
Yeah,
uh, and that's how he described it. It just felt like an indie movie.
yeah, yeah. Jeff Bridges has a very famous quote where he says, like, he was talking about how the script was in flux. I think the story was kind of locked in, but the script was very much in flux. So he finally just adjusted to it. And he said, like, "Hey man, I'm in like a $200 million student film, and we just meet in the dressing rooms and figure out what we're going to do that day." So, and it does have like sort of a loosey goosey quality to it because of that. Like, they do feel like real conversations. It's less screenwriter quippy than most movies of this type.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That does make
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, it doesn't like yeah. None of those actors really seem like action stars, but they're in this action movie. But it does feel more. Oh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I guess it does feel a little bit more grounded in indie and whatnot. And also in this film, we get the first showing of Phil Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, who would go on
Hmm.
to be in Avengers and Captain Marvel. Like there was like a whole bunch of like little things I noticed in this film that would later on be bigger and better things and later on down in the MCU, like Phil Coulson. We hear Jarvis for the first time, Paul Bettany's voice. We
Hmm.
the Ten Rings. It's I don't know, it's pretty cool to see all these little things like, oh, that becomes that later on. Like I also noticed for the first time when the big fight at the end, like I saw you see Roxxon, you see
Hmm.
the Roxxon logo in the background of a building and on the side of a truck. So it's always, I don't know, things like that kind of get my nerd juices flowing. I was like, oh, that becomes that later on. Ooh, I
Yeah,
don't know, it makes me
yeah,
happy.
yeah. It's a lot of fun, and of course, like, I'd say the big game changer is in that post credits scene at the end, where you have Samuel L. Jackson popping
Mm,
up as Nick Fury, saying, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative," and that, of course, was a huge game changer, because it used to be each comic book movie would basically exist in isolation. Like, you'd had
yeah.
something like in Batman Forever where Bruce Wayne says, "Oh, the circus must be halfway to Metropolis by now," and that was our comic book crossover movie.
That was our shared cinematic universe.
Exactly. And then suddenly we have Samuel L. Jackson popping up as Nick Fury, a character who in the Ultimates universe was modeled after him. And apparently
Mm.
Samuel L. Jackson gave his permission for that because he said, like, well, if you ever do a movie version, I get the part. And that was I don't think he charged them for use of his likeness or anything. He just said, like, yeah, I want to play the part. And that's worked out pretty well for Sam.
Not bad, not bad. Did all right.
So, I mean, Zaki, do you remember what your reaction was when you first got an inkling that they were going to actually cross over their characters and have them exist in the same universe, like in the comics?
Oh, it was so like I remember the how the innocence of just when Coulson at the end of the film he's like call us Shield
Mm-hmm.
and be like holy crap Shield
Yeah.
and then and I had unfortunately I had the reveal of Sam Jackson spoiled for me before going in, otherwise that would have just blown my hair back. but
Yeah.
but uh I remember, I think even more than seeing Nick Fury at the end of Iron Man, which is amazing, but when Tony Stark shows up at the end of The Incredible Hulk,
Right.
that was the first time it like occurred to me like we're doing this, like this is happening,
Yeah.
and I was gonna say it's the
Mm.
first time we had a shared universe, but I'm like, well, no, I mean there was like Thor and the Hulk movie, or like the old TV show, and
Right.
you had the
Right.
Daredevil crossover. But like, I mean, the idea of like we're doing this for real, and the idea like I remember in the lead up to Avengers, like the biggest sort of bridge you had to cross in your mind was like, am I going to believe that Iron Man and Thor can exist in the same universe?
Yes.
And now
Mm.
here we are, 14 years past that, and we're like, so we're gonna have like a multiverse, and there's like three different Spider-Mans, and we're doing that, and there,
Yeah.
I mean, this is why I say this all the time. I'm like, and John, you know this because you see the Twitter conversations that I get pulled into sometimes. I'm like, people complain about all this stuff, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, when I was a kid, the Hulk's name was David Banner.
Right.
Like he didn't talk, and he had like red blood, and it was like a fraction of what's in the comics. And we were like, well, that's what we have, and we're lucky to have it.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm just like a pig in shit right now. And I when I see people complaining about this stuff, I'm just like, man, I don't even know what y'all complaining about.
I know.
Mm.
We really are living in a golden age of geekdom. I mean,
Yes.
all this stuff that I never would have even dreamt of back in
Yeah.
the day. I mean, it
Yeah.
boggles the mind when you think of how far we've come and how much this has grown just from this. And yeah, and you go back and you look at this film, and it does seem pretty contained because it is still taking place in a world that is like recognizably our world, you know.
Yeah.
And they
Absolutely.
have and there are also things that just kind of scream out this movie was made in 2008. You have like the references to MySpace, and
Mm.
we've got the
Flip
cameo
phones.
from Jim Cramer from Mad Money. And did you know that Mad Money is still going on? I actually like looked that up not long ago, and I'm like, wow, that show's still on. I had no idea.
I, I guess no one's canceled it yet. So I was like,
Yeah,
he's just like, all right, I'll keep screaming in his camera.
I was like, I thought Jon Stewart drove a stake through that guy's heart years ago, but apparently not.
I thought you were dead. We killed you. Yeah. I also saw like a good amount of flip phones throughout this movie too. I was like, oh, I remember those.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And but I mean, I'd also forgotten like how intense like the prison scenes are early on after Tony Stark is captured. I mean, you see snippets of him being tortured, and like Tony Stark's escape from the cave in his first prototype Iron Man armor. It's shot like a horror film with like
Really
Iron
is.
Man as the monster, and it's really effective filmmaking. I was pretty impressed with that.
Yeah, no, it's really something. I also noticed there was something when Tony meets Yinsen for the first time, and
Hmm.
Yinsen says, "Oh yeah, we met before at this conference in Bern, but you were
Yeah,
like." you were super drunk, so I'm surprised. You of course you wouldn't remember me. And if you go to Iron Man 3, they actually show that scene of them meeting
Yeah,
in the beginning of Iron Man 3. So I was like, oh, that's a nice little thing that they did there.
yeah, that was a cool callback. Yeah, it's cool that they gave Yinsen another cameo. It's I kind of wish that some of the subsequent films had done a little more of with Yinsen, because like it's everything Tony Stark ends up doing is because of this one guy who sacrifices his life for him, and I wish like he'd gotten like a shout out in some of the later films, or we saw like his picture in Tony's office or something like that. I feel like they dropped that ball a little bit,
Hmm.
you know?
We do see him in a flashback in Iron Man 3.
Right, right. Yeah, we
Right.
do see that, but I don't think there's anything besides
No.
that. So,
Although, I should, one thing I've said this in the past. I mean, as somebody who really was starved of Muslim representation on screen, as a kid,
mhm.
I I continue to love the fact that the Iron Man's origin, and by extension everything that happens in the MCU, is because of a Muslim telling Tony Stark, "Don't waste your life.
Yeah,
Do something good."
yeah,
Uh, you know. Uh, like when you think about it, like defeating Thanos, it's because Jensen was there at the right moment.
yeah.
You know,
That's true. That's very true.
Yinsen is a true hero of the MCU.
that's right.
That's what I'm saying.
How do you feel about the portrayal of the Middle East, or the Middle Easterners in this movie? Is it Does it get very stereotypical, or do you feel like it's fairly balanced because we have a character like Jensen in it, Zaki?
I appreciated when I saw it that they you know th- they were trying to show that the Ten Rings is not a an overt political organization. It's not comparable to Al Qaeda or something, because it's all these different ethnicities contained within it. That
Hmm.
Yinsen alludes to. And a couple years back, actually, I got to chat with Farhan Tahir, who plays Raza, the leader
Right.
of the Ten Rings of this, and I
Right.
asked him about it, and he's a Muslim actor, and I know he's sensitive to this type of thing, and I asked him, I said, how did you tackle, playing this, and knowing sort of the responsibility of, like, you're playing a Muslim terrorist, and I know that's not something Muslim actors like doing.
Yeah.
And he actually said he appreciated the approach they took, which was to not root the Ten Rings in religious iconography. They're not Muslim terrorists specifically.
Hmm.
And I think it helps that Farhan Tahir added sort of this level of charisma. I think he played him in a very interesting way, that makes him a compelling villain, completely separate from sort of the terrorist trappings.
Yes. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's true. That's
Very
true.
true.
I was also. This is also like only like a year removed when he's also at the very beginning of Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where he plays Captain of the
That's
Kelvin,
right.
which
That's right.
Jim Kirk's dad is on, and it was a pretty straight heroic role for him, and I was like, wow, this actor was having a good year. So,
Doing
he
pretty
had
well.
meaty parts in two blockbusters. That's not bad. It was Captain
Yeah,
Rabot,
not
as
bad
I
at all.
recall. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's also it's still funny. I found this funny. I think when I first viewed the movie, and I still find it funny now, is like when Tony Stark escapes captivity in Afghanistan, and he comes back to the States, and he says, "Well, the first thing I want to do is get an American hamburger." And then the next scene, we see him, and they've stopped at Burger King, and I'm like, "Really? You're an Angelino, and you don't go to In and Out Burger?"
Yeah, like I mean, from what I've read, like it was very specific that they have Burger King because I
Yeah.
believe like that. I think Robert Downey Jr. said that, like, yeah, Burger King burgers actually played a part in his sobriety and helping him get
I,
sober.
I read that.
Because
I read that. It was in the IMDb trivia page. It says that he had a night where in 2003 where he was in like a car full of drugs, and he got a Burger King burger, and the burger was so disgusting it inspired him to clean his life up. And I'm like, that's the weirdest backstory for product placement ever, I think.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why Burger King didn't run with that for future advertising.
I mean, and I don't even remember what type of drugs RDJ was doing at this point, but it says something that he considered the Burger King burger too disgusting to put into his body. That's and then that ends up into a product placement deal for Burger King. That's hilarious to me.
That's right. Burger King, we hope you get sober.
Burger King, we're worse than heroin.
Wow. Wow.
But
I mean, yeah, no lies there, though. Yeah.
yeah, I just think it's. I'm like, really, you haven't had an American hamburger in 3 months, and Burger King's the place you go to?
Yeah, that does, I guess it's also funny to see like the world's wealthiest man eating, just like a cheap, run of the mill fast food burger like Burger King. Maybe there's
That's
some humor
true.
there.
That's true.
I
I
don't know.
remember like a couple years ago after the Oscars, Patton Oswalt won an Oscar for, or no, he won an Emmy for his last stand up special, and he had his brother Matt Oswalt take a picture of him like in the middle of the night at an Arby's with his Emmy sitting there, and he's just sitting there. And Patton Oswalt said he got all sorts of calls and texts from people like, "Are you okay, man? Is everything all right?" And it was because he was at an Arby's, which is just sort of the shorthand fast food restaurant for depression and emotional breakdown. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've eaten at Arby's.
yeah, yeah. I mean, nothing,
I've,
nothing will make you question your life choices like eating at an Arby's.
yeah, when you're chugging out horsey sauce, you're in a bad place.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounded way more sexually graphic than I meant to, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Oh, good times. Yeah, we can also talk about Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she gave a pretty solid performance. I mean, I'm not very familiar with the character Pepper Potts, but I mean, from what I saw, I think she's pretty much, embodied the character pretty well, and
Yeah,
she did great.
yeah, and she and Downey have a decent chemistry. I think it was interesting to read who Jon Favreau's first choice for the role was. It was actually Rachel McAdams, who would, of course, later go on to
Mm.
co-star with Robert Downey Jr. in Sherlock Holmes, and later came to the MCU as Doctor Strange's love interest, Dr. Christine Palmer. So, and
Oh wow.
like I could see that working. I could see her being a little bit more like the comic book Pepper Potts, but yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow did a nice job, I thought.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Solid. I dug it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Zaki, do
Absolutely.
you have any like other favorite moments in the movie?
Oh, I think from the moment I love that it's become a meme now. But
Hmm.
Tony Stark built this in a cave with lots of scraps.
Yes.
Is again from the and I've been like a Jeff Bridges super fan since I was just a little kid, and so I was just delighted that he was in this movie. I love that because I watched it with my wife, and she had no idea who Obadiah Stane was. I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh, I mean, I know Obadiah Stane. He's gonna be the bad guy. So she was completely taken off guard by his heel turn,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love the just the quirkiness that Bridges brings to it. I think he's such a great underrated MCU villain. He doesn't get mentioned at all 14 years later,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I think he's great. I think he's great as Obadiah. I think he his motivation is very clear. I think it all just works.
Yeah, I
Yeah. Yeah.
agree. He is. You don't expect Jeff Bridges to be the villain, but he really brings it off. I mean, he is threatening and he's unsettling, and he's got a very striking look because he like shaved his head for the role and grew a full beard, so he looks very different from the Jeff Bridges we ordinarily know. He's not the dude anymore.
Yeah,
Definitely.
no.
Um,
Yeah, but no, he's fantastic in this. Like,
yeah.
I always like you mentioned that line, the with a box of scraps. I always got a kick out of the way he delivered it. Maybe it's because of the pause between
Hmm.
he built us in the cave, pause with a box of scraps. Like I don't know, like
Right.
that always gives me a laugh whenever I see it. And I do like um Obadiah Stane's turn because it is something you don't see coming unless you watch it another time or a
Hmm.
couple other times and really see like you really see like the underlying things about how Obadiah really feels about Tony. You see like, oh wow, he's really kind of maybe jealous and envious of him, and he sort of feels like all of this Stark Industries should be his. And like I actually remember watching I watched some like reaction videos of this movie before the podcast, and there's a scene where you see Obadiah playing on the piano, and he's playing a piece by Salieri,
Salieri.
Hmm.
and
Yep.
yeah, and like that's supposed to be like a nod to see how he's like Salieri and Tony Stark is like Mozart. And if you ever seen Amadeus, you know that angry rivalry that Salieri always had for Amadeus. So I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't notice that before. That's a nice little nod there.
That is a nice nod. Yeah. I think that came from Jeff Bridges because he's a. I mean, he can really play the piano. So.
Oh, very nice. And I also liked how Jeff Obadiah was yelling at the Peter Billingsley, the guy who
Hmm.
played
Yep.
Ralphie from A Christmas Story.
Yeah. Yeah. He and Favreau go back, and I think wasn't Billingsley like a producer of some kind on this film?
Uh,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, and amazingly enough, they bring Peter Billingsley's character back as as sort of a villain henchman in Spider-Man: Far From Home, which is probably one of the most unexpected callbacks in the MCU. I think.
I did not see that coming.
Yeah,
Peter Billingsley waiting patiently for his Hot Toys MCU figure.
exactly. We need like bald bespectacled Peter Billingsley uh, in action figure form. I was thinking like during this rewatch because they talk a lot about how Obadiah Stane goes back so far with Tony's dad and how they were like best friends and he helped build this company. And I'm like, it's kind of too bad that we haven't seen Obadiah Stane in flashbacks at all
Yeah.
because we've come back to
Mm.
Howard Stark a few times. It might be cool to see like a young Obadiah Stane somewhere in there as like Howard Stark's trusted associate
Yeah,
because
no, that's very true. That's a good point.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly by implication, and maybe this is just my head canon, but it felt like Obadiah had some kind of role to play in Howard's death,
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
and that I don't think that's even in the mix at this point. I don't even know how you could retcon that in there, but
saying like Obadiah was Hydra or something like that.
yeah, something like that. I mean, I suppose they could do something like that, but um, definitely the idea of like he's the man who toiled in the shadow of the greater man, very much the Amadeus thing. um but I also kind of I like the idea that he was fine playing his role because Tony Stark was the dilettante who, he's the brains, he's just coming up with this stuff, and Obadiah is the face of the company.
Yeah, yeah,
And so kind of like he's
Mm.
forced to make this heel turn when suddenly Tony like wakes up,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and that's very much a an arc that Tony Stark had in the comics as well, where he doesn't do it immediately after he comes back from his capture of stop making weapons, but that is something that the writers had him do in like I think it was like the in the 70s sometime when you had like younger writers coming in after Stan Lee who were of a slightly more liberal bent, I think. And it was still like the tail end of the hippie era, so they had him stop with the weapons manufacturing. And but it's a stronger arc to have him do that immediately after he comes back and he realizes his complicity in all that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh yeah,
it's a
yeah.
great moment where you actually see a missile or a bomb like land next to him, and he glances over, and it's got the Stark Industries logo on it.
Yeah, that says so much.
Yeah, yeah. And amazingly, I didn't realize until this rewatch. I think it's before we even hear him referred to by name as Tony Stark. They don't establish his name until like that flashback,
Right.
because they go back in time like 36 hours before his capture, and then you get that little informative film that's like your sort of capsule Tony Stark bio.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's when they do the whole. They give the whole backstory, and we see,
Hmm.
a young Robert Downey Jr. in old articles
Yeah,
saying he's Tony Stark, and seeing him as a kid next to young Bill Gates putting
yeah,
together computers and whatnot. Yeah, yeah. I thought that was a good way to sort of give like the background story of Tony Stark. For those who aren't familiar with like who he is and his background and whatnot.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of fun, and some decent photoshopping on young RDJ on the old Rolling Stone covers and stuff.
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Yeah, yeah. I liked how, like, in a few scenes you can hear like the old '60s theme song to Iron Man that they kind of put in a
Yeah,
few
Yeah,
scenes.
that's great.
I got a kick
that's
out of that.
that's a great like deep cut thing that you probably wouldn't notice on your first watch, but then you listen for it and you're like, yeah, Tony Stark makes you feel he's cool exactly.
That's Rhodey's ringtone.
Yeah, yeah. He sneaks it in a few times. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and overall, I like I would say like a lot of the graphics still hold up. I would say like a lot of the
Mhm.
action scenes still hold up.
Yeah,
I like the scenes like they show Tony sort of teaching himself how to be Iron Man.
yeah,
The training montages. The problems with the icing, and he's learning how to use the suit and how to build it and how to fly. And of course, he ends up crashing through his mansion and smashing cars and whatnot. But he's like kind of learning how he's kind of teaching himself how to use the suit, and because like there's no one else to really
hmm.
teach him. But
That
but he's
that is a lot of fun, and it gets some more humor into the film, which certainly helps, and it helps your identification with Tony Stark. And I mean, a choice that we kind of take for granted now, but I think was a really great choice for the time, was to do those close-ups of Robert Downey Jr. with the HUD display stuff around him, so you see him inside his helmet. So that helps you carry that identification you have with Tony Stark through the rest of the film, through the Iron Man sequences.
Yeah.
Um,
oh yeah.
and that's become such a standard thing. But I think that was a great choice that they made when they were making this film, because it.
It's so ingenious
Mhm.
that when you look back on it, you're like, well, of course you had to do it that way,
Right.
right? But I mean,
Mhm.
I remember very distinctly before this movie came out, that was like the question, like, how can you have him? You can't even see his face. It's not expressive. How are you going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And then this simple thing, like, well, you just stick Downey in a closet and shine a flashlight at his face or whatever they did, you know.
Right.
He's basically like in the year 2000,
Yes.
you know. and and it's great when you think about it, like for Iron Man, for Iron Man's appearance in Spider-Man Homecoming,
Yeah.
you figure that's like a tenth of it right there. It's just him with like the light on his face,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
you know.
it's a surprisingly low tech kind of solution, but it
Yeah.
really is ingenious. And but you look back at it, and yeah, it seems obvious in retrospect, but no, I mean, because it's funny to see the way like other superhero movies would address that same problem. Like in the Spider-Man films, they would just have him like unmask at the slightest opportunity. Like, Tobey Maguire's like, "Oh, I've got a little soot on my mask. I'll whip it off in front of this train full of people." And I remember like the first Andrew Garfield movie, I was kind of on the fence about seeing it because it didn't look that great to me. And I saw a clip
Mm.
where Andrew Garfield like unmasked to calm down a little kid, and I was like, okay, I don't think I'm gonna bother with seeing this one in the theater, because I
Yeah.
want to see Spider Man. I don't want to see like whoever's playing Spider Man at that moment in time. But the HUD display thing I think worked really well, and it fortunately spared us the to have from having like an unmasked Iron Man too much. We get a little of that in the climax, but I think that's acceptable because the armor is shutting down a little bit.
Right, right, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I still think it holds up. The effects hold up.
Hmm.
I mean, of course, we've come a long way since then, as far as like special effects and whatnot. But like, I mean, I still think it's pretty strong. Like I said before, I think it works very well.
Yeah, yeah, it still works really well, and it's not as out there as the Marvel Universe films get later on. I mean, you put this next to something like Thor Ragnarok or Thor Love and Thunder, and it's just like, yeah, these
Mm.
take place in the same universe. It's just kind of insane how far we've come in the 14, 15 years since.
It really is. It really is.
And
Yeah.
and they packed so many films into. I mean, what are we at? Like we're closing in on 30 films now, and at least half a dozen different TV shows.
I believe so. Yeah. Like
It,
I mean, I could pull up the the phases, but yeah,
mhm.
I think we're it's around there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's something I find fascinating about the MCU is that just out of necessity they have to they can't do comic book time because it's like
Mm.
in comic books famously they do comic book time where the characters are sort of always the same age and they just kind of drag the past behind them, but that past sort of keeps moving forward in time. Like Tony Stark is always going to be 35 years old, and
Right.
Mm. Oh
but
yeah.
for real world actors who age 1 year for every year that passes in the world, uh, you've only got like a 10, maybe a 15-year window where they can plausibly play these characters. So it's really interesting now that we're at a point where they've kind of rotated a few actors out of the roles and the characters with them. They haven't done like a major recasting. I don't think they could plausibly recast Tony Stark or Steve Rogers at this point. So they just retired the
Right.
characters with the actors, and it's really going to be interesting to see what they do with that going forward because those are two
It,
big characters to lose.
it's
Mm.
kind of interesting when you think about it because the MCU made a decision, right? They could have done the James Bond thing
Hmm.
or the Star Wars thing, right? So Star Wars being where
Yeah.
you retire the actors or retire the characters, and they decided no, we're gonna the characters and actors are inextricably linked, and the impact of that was so sizable that James Bond ended up doing the MCU thing.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. They actually spoilers for No Time to Die. They actually killed off James Bond with Daniel Craig. So
Wow.
I mean, they're going to have to do a reboot, then another reboot the next time they bring James Bond back, which is
Yeah.
that's kind of wild that they did that with Bond.
That is
But
pretty bonkers.
but
Okay. But yeah, Zaki. Like so, as far as Iron Man goes, is this one of your favorite MCU films? Do you have any other faves up there? Like,
Yeah,
where does this rank for you?
well, I've long since stopped even attempting to rank them because there's just too many of them. So there's
yeah.
just what I've said previously. I'm like, I'm basically on board for most of them. It's like there's like a spectrum of quality. Some I like more than others. This is definitely in the the front end of that spectrum.
Hmm.
I think what when you look at Iron Man, you obviously have to look at everything that came after, but you also have to look at all the attempted MCUs that didn't take,
Yeah, that's true.
and and and
Mm.
those make you appreciate Iron Man all the more. Because the great thing about this movie is honestly, we got the little sequel tease with the Nick Fury at the end. But let's say none of those sequels happened. Well, you've still got a great movie with a great beginning, middle, and end.
That's true. That's true. I mean, this
Yeah.
would have been a great standalone film, and I think that's the secret. Is like most every other studio that's tried to do that, they try to ramp up too quickly. Like we had the Tom Cruise
Mm.
Mummy movie a few years back,
That's right.
and they were like, Universal was like, "Well, we're going to do the Dark Universe, and Russell Crowe's going to play Doctor Jekyll, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen," and they had all these plans, and that didn't get any further than that one film because that one film
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but apparently it wasn't that great.
Wasn't particularly
Mm.
great, and their eyes were bigger than their stomach when it came to that.
Yeah.
Like when Iron Man came out, they're not teasing the Infinity Gauntlet. I say this all the time to people. I'm like, the Infinity Saga didn't become the Infinity Saga until after the credits of the first Avengers movie.
Right.
Mm.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
You
because
know, and
yeah.
in hindsight, we're like, oh, they were laying it all out and all the pieces were there. And I'm like, I guarantee you, Kevin Feige, at that moment when they were making Iron Man, was not already thinking about Infinity Gauntlet. He was just trying to get this one out the door.
yeah,
And
exactly.
Yeah.
and it what helps obviously is that Marvel was at that moment, they were not owned by Disney, so they were on the hook for this thing if it didn't succeed.
Yeah, because they leveraged it against like the rights to the characters. So like if Iron Man
That's right.
didn't hit, they would have been in a lot of trouble financially. And Marvel had already gone
Yeah.
through bankruptcy at this point, about 10 years
Right.
Mm.
before. So
Oof.
it,
But yeah, yeah. I mean, I think both you guys are right on the money. Like after this after the MCU did what it did and made this whole multi universe, then everybody was like, oh, I want a multi universe too. And like I
yeah.
think the reason it never really succeeds is because I watched another YouTube video about this too. It's just because like a lot of other companies don't really have they don't really take the time and the patience needed to make a multi-universe. Like you said with the Mummy, and they were going to make a monster universe. The
Hmm.
Mummy or the Mummy movie didn't do well, so they just scrapped the whole thing. And like people
Right.
forget that when this was being built and Feige was putting out these movies, not every movie hit. I mean, of course the most infamous one, Thor: The Dark World. But like people don't like I think a lot of companies don't take that are okay, a lot of companies aren't okay with them having a few duds in
Hmm.
order to get the bigger picture
But
and
you know what? I
and
think with Marvel,
universe.
even their worst films, there's still a certain baseline. Even their worst films are still like decent. At the very
Yeah,
least,
yeah,
they're like pretty good. Thor: The Dark World gets a lot of grief, but I think that's at worst like a C+ movie.
I agree.
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean it's not that bad. It's bad in comparison to the other Marvel movies. It doesn't maybe do what some of the other ones do, but and yeah, it's very interesting to compare them with DC in particular because like DC and Warner's, they seem like they're the most poised to build another cinematic universe that's comparable to Marvel's, but for I would say a variety of reasons, they haven't really been able to do that. I think, yeah, part of the problem is they tried to ramp it up too quickly. Like Man of Steel was basically a standalone Superman film, from what I could see. I think they had
Mm.
like one satellite that had Wayne Tech on it or something like that. But if I'm remembering the chronology correctly, like Avengers came out while they were shooting it, so I think the game kind of changed while they were making that film, and then suddenly Warner realized, oh, we can't quite do what we've just been doing for the last 20 years of standalone films anymore. We've got to make a universe, and then they tried to ramp up to that in Batman v Superman, and it had, I would say, mixed success.
Yeah, I mean, Batman v Superman definitely has its fans, its Snyder Bros and whatnot. But like for the
Hmm.
most part, it it didn't quite hit like it should have. And then of course you and I we saw Justice League in the theaters, and we remember that film. We know how that did.
We did. I still have the scars.
Mm.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
still wake up in a cold sweat. Yes.
yeah. I think sometimes I'm like, oh, if I could have told 12-year-old me, yeah, someday there's going to be a live action Justice League movie, and you're not going to be that interested in seeing it, I would not have known what to think. But
Yeah, that's I. Yeah, let's all right. Let's just forget it.
yeah,
Let's not talk about that.
I mean, Zaki, I know
Ooh.
you've had your encounters with the Snyderverse people at times. You're like a handy guide for me for like who to block on Twitter. I'm just like, oh, this person's being an asshole to Zaki. Oh, I'll just block this person, and I'll block this person, and oh, look, I've already blocked this one.
Oh boy.
What's funny is I'm on board with Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I don't even mind BVS, and I actually really liked Snyder's Justice League cut.
Uh huh.
And
Ah.
so it's hilarious to me that some of these very zealous Snyder fans have just had it in for me for what, like 6 years now, however long it's been,
Yeah.
and it's because you can't even be remotely critical, right? So
Yeah.
so I can't say something like I really like Snyder's Justice League, I think the expectations being placed on it were unfair, and so it probably didn't perform the way they would have hoped because they had too high expectations. That's what I said, and that translates as me being anti-Snyder.
Yeah, you're a hater.
Mm,
Yeah,
that's
and it's
right.
like how do you cut through this sort of this? I mean, I've said this before. The most vehement QAnon types,
Hmm.
there's like a Venn diagram where they overlap with the most vehement Snyder heads.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
It,
sounds right.
It's
and I want to emphasize most vehement. So obviously, it's not a reference to anybody who enjoys Snyder's movies, which I include myself in, by the way. But
yeah.
yeah, there's some really nutty people out there who it is literally their entire identity, or certainly their entire online identity, is that, and that's
Yeah,
not
that
particularly
is the
healthy.
weird thing to me is like you go on Twitter and you see people that they have like in their bios it's like associate producer of the Snyder Cut,
Yeah,
and they have like the restore the Snyderverse hashtag in their bio, and it literally is like their entire personality, and it's just
yeah.
I
It's like, yeah,
I
maybe,
don't get where that comes from. I don't get where how he inspired so much fanaticism. That's weird to me.
yeah. It's
But
like,
It's
guys,
odd. Yeah.
yeah, it's just a movie, guys. Maybe step away from the computer and go outside for a bit.
yeah, touch
You know,
grass, as the kids say.
yeah, touch the grass. It's kids, exactly.
Yeah, but I
Oh
mean,
boy.
but I like Zaki. Is there where do you want to see like the Marvel Cinematic Universe go from here? Is there something like you're dying to see as a comics fan that you haven't seen quite yet, like a certain character that you want to bring to it, or a certain story you want to see adapted?
I mean, it's crazy how we're at a point now where we got a Shang-Chi franchise, we
Hmm.
got Moon Knight.
Mm,
I mean, this is stuff, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't have even imagined this stuff when I was a kid, right?
Hmm.
Uh, Certainly, like Shang-Chi, growing up, Master of Kung Fu was one of my favorite comics ever. I still think it's one of the greatest books. Now it's being retroactively called racist, and
Yeah,
I'm like so frustrated by that because I'm like, yes, Fu Manchu, no doubt, but like Shang-Chi, the character is a great character. He's a great example of Asian representation, and
yeah,
it's very frustrating to me that that entire book is now being just like written off.
mm,
yeah,
Super frustrating to
yeah.
me,
That
you know?
that is weird. I also I remember like when they were doing the Iron Fist series on Netflix, there was a certain segment of saying like, oh well, this character should be Asian, and I'm like, but the comic character isn't Asian,
Right.
and I just thought it
mm.
was weird that they automatically thought that because he's a martial arts master he should be Asian because that's a weird stereotypical thing, and I mean,
Yeah, and when all of that was going on, I'm sure the tweets are still there. I was like, no, you don't need to do that because Marvel has a martial artist who's Asian, and it's Shang Chi. Do that,
exactly,
and so so the fact that we got that movie, I was like, I couldn't. This isn't even like, oh, I've been waiting all my life for Shang Chi in the movies because I just never expected it would happen.
yeah, yeah, and they
Um,
even kind of figured out a way to incorporate the Mandarin, who,
Yeah, they did such a great
Yeah.
job with it. Tony Long was great.
yeah,
So my point is like I'm at this point when it comes to MCU, I'm like whatever they do, I'm excited to see it. I don't really have any expectations
yeah,
because
Mm,
as far to me everything leading up to Endgame up to and including Endgame was like mind blowing, right? So
hmm,
everything after that is just gravy to me. and
mm,
and I'm also like because it's all building up to Secret Wars. I mean, I remember buying Secret Wars, the original comic, off of the newsstand back in the mid '80s,
hmm,
and if you would have told me back then, like it's going to be a while, but this is going to be a movie one day, all these characters are going
yeah.
to be in there at some variation, I never would have believed it, right?
I mean,
So
yeah, I really wonder what they're going to do with that and how they're going to do that because I mean, for starters, we no longer have Captain America or Iron Man, so that right there makes a very different thing, and
yeah,
yeah.
and who knows what the character is going to be like. It's just wild how much the Marvel Cinematic Universe has expanded, and they've got so many characters and movies and projects now that it's tough to keep up with it all.
right,
Yeah. I
It's
mean, I know, like, right now, like, the few characters that people are really looking forward to, of course, the X-Men. Everybody's really looking forward to the Marvel X-Men,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I mean, and Doctor Doom. They hadn't really done. I mean, they did Doctor Doom in that horrible, horrible a Fantastic Four film with Michael B.
Yeah,
Jordan and Miles Teller, but like people really are thirsting for like a well done Doom, and like I would say
Yeah,
those are the two characters that I'm really looking forward to. Hopefully, when
yeah.
Marvel like, gets to
yeah,
them.
yeah. I'm really looking forward to seeing a good version of the Fantastic Four on
Mm,
film. I mean, because the X Men too. Yes, I want to see what Marvel does with them, but we've had some good X Men movies already, so that's
mm.
not going to be quite as thrilling. I mean, it'll be neat to see like something maybe a little closer to the comics, but
Yep,
yeah, we've had
fair enough.
lots of X Men movies. We haven't had a really good Fantastic Four movie yet. As I'm fond of saying, they're 0 for 4. So,
Hey-o.
um, so yeah, I'd really like to see that. I don't know if I want
And
it to
let
be
me
John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, but if that's who they judge as being the best possible Reed and Sue, then sure, I'll go with it.
Mm,
I also think it's, we've got the She-Hulk show is on right now,
Hmm.
and admittedly I have not seen Moon Knight yet. I'll get to it at some point,
I
but
haven't
I
either.
think and I think we're at a point where certainly it feels to me, as a comic reader, what it was like in the 90s or whatever, when you'd have all these big crossovers. And
Hmm.
like, I remember reading the Infinity Gauntlet comic and knowing who maybe half of those characters were,
Yeah.
you know
mm.
and I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, what the hell's going on. I was just kind of, I read it, and then I would delve into back issues to kind of get caught up. And I feel like that's where we're going to be at
Right.
by the time we get to the Kang dynasty, by the time we get to Secret Wars. I have no idea how caught up I'll be, but I'm also like, well, I'm assuming there will be enough there for me to figure it out, and then if need be, and I think audiences will do the same, they'll go back and be like, oh, I'm interested in, She-Hulk. What's her deal? And you go back and you got her whole origin there. It's on Disney Plus. Check it out.
Hmm.
Like it. I don't know how quote unquote essential it is, but it's there as the building blocks for the thing that people are going to watch. People are going to watch the Avengers movies, no matter who's in it.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm,
That's true.
very true.
And the amazing thing is that they're taking characters who have been B or C listers in the comics, and they're making them A listers in the movies, like Iron Man or the Black Panther. I mean, those two
Hmm.
characters. I mean, Black Panther. I don't think he ever had a book for very long. Maybe a 5 year chunk where he had a regular book, and in the movies they make a great movie out of him, and he makes $1 billion.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
incredible too.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a better example, even.
yeah. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy, that was obscure even by comic standards, and I was like, oh, is this going to be their first bomb? And nope.
like, like if I'm sitting here right now, I'm wearing a T-shirt that says "I am Groot,"
Hmm.
and I got it. I got it from Macy's. I was think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Macy's is selling shirts that say "I am Groot." No picture, no nothing.
Right.
It just says "I am Groot."
Yeah. And the general public knows what that's about. They know what that's about.
Exactly.
And Rocket Raccoon made it to the movies before Wonder Woman did.
Amazing.
Wow.
It's just the geeks have truly inherited the earth. It's pretty incredible.
And they still can't even appreciate it.
I
Ugh.
know we still find things to bitch about. There really is no pleasing us.
Yeah.
It's like,
Everything's amazing and no one's happy.
Thor doesn't wear his helmet enough. Oh, you know. Jen Walters handles anger better than Bruce Banner.
Anti-men.
Yeah.
Why's it gotta be all woke in my comic book TV shows?
It's just, I just, I wish I had a function where I could just like reach through my computer screen and slap a few people when I see
Mm,
somebody being that
mm.
stupid online.
Yes, maybe in the future. We're not there yet.
Maybe in the future. That's something to look forward to. But
That's
if
right.
we had a real life Tony Stark, he'd be working on that. I bet.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's all we got for the movie. Any closing thoughts on the Iron Man and this amazing film that still holds up and
Hmm.
was the linchpin of what we know now as the MCU? This was the film that like was Robert Downey Jr.'s big comeback,
Hmm.
essentially.
Yeah.
The fact that like he's like remembered for this role, and
Yeah.
I mean it's
This
it's
is
pretty
like the
it's pretty
first line of
phenomenal.
his obituary. I mean, this is his
Yes.
trademark part.
Yeah,
I mean,
It's
it's
yeah, it's
yeah.
and the fact that it it is I was talking to my wife just earlier today actually about there was a SNL Robert Smigel cartoon in the late 90s
yeah.
Mm.
called Downey Kidder and Haysh.
Uh huh.
Do you guys remember this?
Oh,
I don't think I
kind of.
do. No.
Yeah, it was one of those Smigel cartoons, and the idea was like it's a detective agency with Robert Downey, Margot Kidder, and Anne Heche.
Okay.
The joke, quote unquote, being that all three are just crazy pants, and they're winding up, naked in other people's houses and doing all kinds of things. So they use that as a way to solve
Oh
crimes,
wow. I
right?
don't remember
Oh,
And
this one at all.
I
yeah, I
kind.
mean, it. You talk about hashtag not aged well. Margot Kidder's gone, and Heche just recently left us.
Yeah.
And my point is, first, I didn't find it funny back then, but that's what Robert Downey was. He was a punchline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There was a time where people were doing that, where they'd make fun of people who had like
Yeah.
problem with alcohol. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when people were making punchline where like Lindsay Lohan was the punchline of jokes,
Yeah.
That's right.
and Amy Winehouse
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
unfortunately the punchline, and it's
I
like,
mean, I saw in the IMDb trivia this page. I was skimming it in preparation for today's episode, and in like the Ultimates page where uh, Nick Fury is saying that Samuel L. Jackson should play him in the movie. Apparently, on that same page or in that same scene, he has a line where he says his nose has been smashed more than Robert Downey Jr. And
Wow.
I'm just like,
Oh my
geez,
God.
wow. Wow.
Yikes.
And, RDJ has very likely read that and he
Yeah.
still
Right.
agreed to star in the movie. That's wild because his name used to be synonymous with like squandered potential and
Yeah. So
screw
true.
up in court cases
yeah,
and stuff like that. If you live
And
through,
by the way, when you think about it,
yeah,
you had like Robert Downey fought for this part.
yes,
mm,
Like he knew this was going to be his ticket.
mm-hmm.
And he fought like hell for it. When you can see his audition, he nailed it.
Yeah,
And to see that pay off, right? Like because so many actors are like, "Oh, this will be the thing," right? And it doesn't work out, but it paid off for him in every possible way.
yeah,
And kids look up to him.
yeah,
He's done these Make-A-Wish things, and you see, like, I always think about that, like he'll be known forever, like to a whole generation of kids, and it'll continue on. um, and it's so gratifying that he worked hard to pull himself out of the spiral he was in, and he's on the other side of it, hopefully,
and he
forever.
succeeded so wildly that stuff is now like the footnote in his career.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah,
like there's probably a whole generation of moviegoers who aren't even aware that he once upon a time had substance abuse problems
Hmm.
because that's
So true.
that's how far he's put it behind him, and thankfully will hopefully will continue to do so. I mean, because I know you're never
absolutely.
100% rid of addiction. It's like a everyday fight, but I
Mm,
mean, if anyone can be said to put it past him, I would say Robert Downey Jr. is that guy. So
here,
yeah,
here.
and I mean, I going back to that Burger King story, I think he said like he threw his drugs away in the ocean, and when I was reading that, I was like, I couldn't help but flash on that scene at the end of Iron Man 3 where he's like throwing his old arc reactor into the ocean, and I wonder if that like came out of his life,
Huh.
or
Oh,
maybe it's just a
maybe.
coincidental thing. I don't know, but I mean,
Hmm.
he's become so synonymous with the Tony Stark part. I mean, he basically is Tony Stark at this point,
Yep.
outside of like
Yeah,
Yeah.
inventing stuff.
yeah. No, when he passes away, the obits are going to read Tony Stark. The newspaper's going to read Tony Stark passes away,
Yeah,
and it's going to have a picture of RDJ, and
yeah,
it's going to confuse a lot of people, but that's what's going to happen.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And that's the episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening as always. Zaki, thanks so much for being on our little podcast here. Hope you
Oh, what a joy! Thanks so much for having me. I I just enjoyed chatting about this.
yeah. That's
yeah.
always fun talking movie stuff with you, and you're welcome to come back anytime if you want to talk about another
Oh,
RDJ film or some other film that strikes your fancy. You're welcome anytime. Where can
that sounds
people
great.
find you on the interwebs?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Zaki's Corner. That's Zakis Corner. And as you mentioned at the start, I write for the San Francisco Chronicle. I got some film reviews up there currently, and some stuff coming up. And the Movie Film Podcast. That's one word, Movie Film, which you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you do end up ending up there after listening to this, please let me know that
Yeah.
the SNL Nerds sent you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can
Yeah,
follow
let 'em know.
our shows on Twitter at SNL Nerds Show. You can follow our individual Twitter and Instagram accounts. I'm at Trumbull Comic. That's TRUMBULL and the word comic. Darren, where can people
I'm
find you?
I'm at Darren Credible, DARIN Credible, Twitter and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And and you can also follow us over at Non-Productive.com and contribute to our Patreon over there. We appreciate that. That helps us keep the podcast going. And yeah, please give us a like and rate and review on Apple Podcasts or on the podcast app of your choice.
Yeah, please. And as always, you can maybe donate to our Patreon at Non-Productive.com. Give us some money, give us some dough. Help us grow.
Help us help you.
Yes,
and we will be back next week with another cool thing relating to SNL. We don't know what that is quite yet, but we got some time to figure it out. So we'll be back next week. But until then, Nerds out!
This has been a Non-Productive Media presentation. Executive producer Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.